Greetings, it is I, Countess Naravan Jacobin, Lord and Emperor of the Jacoban Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my discussion on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the second edition of AD&D. Where we last left off, we dived into treasure. Today I'm going to talk about a couple different options you can do with treasure. Just things that you can help define your treasures just a little bit more for your games. Let's start with a big one that's very important. Who's looking after this treasure? Who's guarding it? There are two types. Unintelligent and intelligent. Now we're going to start with unintelligent, but unintelligent isn't to say that it has no intelligence at all. This is considered animal intelligence. Creatures of animal intelligence don't tend to gather treasure. They don't really have a reason to do it. Now granted, maybe their victims, whatever they've been eating, capturing, devouring, might have treasure on them. This is where you get some of the reasons. It's incidental treasure, that you might get into some kind of creature's lair and find the remains of picked off creatures that are there. They don't, this is the kind of thing that most creatures aren't going to eat this type of stuff. So of course, it's just going to be littering around there with the bones of their victims. Might have some armor, weapons, other things, magic items that aren't edible. So of course, yeah, they're just going to be scattered about. An advantage of this is creatures do tend to be relatively cleanly, and cleaning out of a den does occur. So you might find nearby to wherever this lair would be, nest, den, whatever, junk piles of refuse from them, which could very well include magic items and other treasure things. Now this doesn't say that there are other reasons treasure could exist with it. Certain kind of animals might collect shiny things. They might be attracted to it, similar to what a magpie or crow would do. But think on the monster scale. Some kind of large animal might do that. Certain things might just integrate it. You might find some kind of magic rope in a giant bird's nest. That could be something that could occur. Other circumstances is you could find it in their belly. If it's a creature that does not have arms and would not be picky about that, it's just going to swallow it whole. Sharks, in real life, tend to have unusual things in their belly. It can be the same in adventure. There are things like sharks or other monsters, they're just going to swallow everything whole, so you might find treasure deep within their gullet that's just sitting there. On the other hand, there are creatures that eat things like magic items and treasure. They actually eat them. At that point in time, you will find them eating it and digesting it. So any treasure you might find is gathered because they like eating that sort of thing. It's not going to stay around. So you can see, these animal-based intelligent creatures may have treasure for a variety of reasons. And so you could very easily just have, in one of these circumstances, treasure. Now on the other hand, you have intelligent. Intelligent creatures gather treasure for a variety of reasons. Now this is important to say that you don't necessarily have to give the full reason why this creature is gathering the treasure. You want at least some kind of hints at it because that's important, that if you would take that treasure, you know how the person might react. But they might gather it because they might want to hoard it to spend it on various things. It might be a sign of power in whatever situation they're in. Other times, the situation and the reasons behind it might be alien. Why does a dragon gather treasure? Just because it's something in their instinct. Other creatures could have other unusual reasons for gathering treasure that your players would never quite understand. That's why you don't always have to explain to your characters why it's there. It just might be like, dragons collect treasure. If you take it from a dragon, it's probably going to be pissed off. Things like that. Then you have to figure out what's going to happen should they take it. If they're not killing the dragon, they're just stealing this treasure, the dragon might be pissed to come off of them. If they take it from basically a chieftain who was using that treasure to show off their power, well, you might destabilize that tribe, which could cause problems in and of itself. So you see, there is reactions to when they take treasure that you also have to think about, that your players might not think about. Now, it's also important to note, most people, because they're intelligent, aren't going to leave their treasure unguarded. Now, they might have guards for that, but guards can be untrustworthy. So it's probably not going to be the only thing they're going to put there. Traps are a big option. And guardian beasts. Those animals that we talked about before, some of them can be employed to guard after a treasure. It's not their treasure, it's someone else's. They've just been put in charge of looking after it. Now next I want to talk about the difference between planned treasure and random encounter treasure. So the difference between those is planned treasure should always be more important, should always be better. Random encounter treasure is because there are certain monsters, when you face them, it will say in their statistic block that you will get just some kind of treasure they're carrying on their body, they're traveling with. Planned treasure should be some kind of layer that they have, some kind of location that you might have to discover or find. That's a level of dedication to discovering this treasure that's different than, oh, I just killed a monster, drop some stuff. That's why it should be much more important to discover these things, because it should be some kind of goal. It should be some kind of victory over it. Just beating the monster is cool, but the adventure of discovering where it might have hidden some of its treasure is an entirely another thing differently. It's an indifferent thing, and it can also lead you to storylines. That's what the planned treasures are for, going along storylines for your characters and drawing them around what kind of plot that you want them to. This treasure should be one of the incentives that's dragging them down the line. Granted, it shouldn't be the only incentive you should be able to establish some other kinds of reasons that they might decide to go after this treasure, that they might feel it's necessary to journey after this, go after this quest. Again, the treasure might be the reason behind it, or something else could be driving them, and the treasure's just extra icing on the cake. Regardless, you just have to think of the difference between these two. That planned treasure you're putting out is really the big incentive on the treasure end you're putting out for your characters. The random stuff is just little inklings, little tidbits that are whetting their appetite for the big thing, and you should keep it like that. You also should worry about balancing things out too, that you're not giving too much treasure in these cases, that you're not overloading them with treasure. And that's where a lot of these come in, because when you're planning them out, it's a little better. That random stuff that you're giving out, you have to be careful with it, because that's the stuff that might unbalance with whatever you're already planning. You should look at both of them, plan accordingly for whatever you're doing in your game. Now, it is important to note, in the Monster Compendium, you will find that they have listed under everything basically a treasure type by number, by letter. These treasure types go to a chart that is in the Dungeon Master's Guide that will let you know the kind of things that are in a treasure. Effectively, you look at the letter, you can then look up the treasure and figure out what kind of treasure should be appropriate to the monster you're fighting. The letter will effectively tell you how much of whatever is in it, what kind of levels in it, things like that. It gives you some basic information to allow you to break down what kind of treasure you're going to be giving out for that monster. So that's it for today. I talked some more about treasure. I went over two major concepts. First, I talked about who's controlling treasure. Intelligent creatures, unintelligent creatures. Both are very important to reflect on what kind of existence this treasure would be, what kind of things would be in that treasure. Unintelligent creatures are probably going to have a lot of different things in comparison to intelligence creatures. Intelligent creatures might only go for gold. This one, it might just have some magic items and stuff because that's what it killed. That's what those things had in its inventory. You have to see these and be able to compare them. In the same retrospect, talking about the planned treasures that you're coming up with and the random treasures, and balancing out that. You want to give enough treasure to your players that they're feeling like they're accomplishing something, but not so much to unbalance the game as a whole. You have to keep things to a reasonable level and a balance within the game system anyway. Doing that, balancing your treasure, is one of the more important things you can do. And of course, I did finish up by mentioning the treasure charts. In the next episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the problems related to treasures, and then move into talk about magic items, a very important aspect of treasure that we haven't really talked about too much. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It should support the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.